What we try to answer is why mentoring works, as anybody here in this room is interested in that question, and if mentoring is an effective talent development strategy or tool in organizations. So I'm talking today about workplace mentoring, not youth mentoring, workplace mentoring. So that's important to know. And the main question or questions I want to address today is why does mentoring, workplace mentoring work? How does it work? For whom does it work? When does it work? Some questions already addressed by Jean as well, but in this case focused on workplace mentoring. And the main point what I want to make today is why do we need a center for evidence-based mentoring? Two answers: to appraise and use the evidence that we have already, but also very important, we need more evidence. Now, that's what I'm going to argue today. What do we know about workplace mentoring? First of all, there is evidence that it seems to work. There's no extremely strong evidence, but we can be confident when we start a mentoring process that it will have the highest chances of positive outcomes. And we also know a bit about the conditions under which it works. When does it work? And very important is the fit. It's already mentioned today, the fit in interest, fit in cognitive styles and other variables that are important. But there is some connection between the mentor and the mentee, some kind of chemistry, perceived similarity. Relatedly, the relationship quality, that's an important determinant if it works. And also the clarity of purpose, and it's a motivation variable, that you are going together in the right direction, that you know what you are heading to, what your goals are. It's also a very determinant for success in a mentor and mentoring relationships. But unfortunately, the effect sizes, already mentioned today as well, also in workplace mentoring, are quite low and moderate at most. And this is particularly true when we look at outcomes that can be objectively measured. Then, in that case, the effect sizes are quite low. So, if we look at the literature, and that's what we're going to do now, is that most conclusions are based on more subjective measures. Self-report. So I found it interesting, I've learned a lot, nice guy, my mentor, and these kind of evaluations. And if we put it in a widely accepted evaluation model developed by Kilpatrick many years ago, 40 years or so, you can see the reference in the bottom. There are two categories of criteria. The first category is internal criteria, and that's reaction in the first place. So does it give you a positive effect? Do you feel good in the mentoring context? And also immediate knowledge. So what did you learn? The typical outcome also in education, just doing an exam, that's a learning criteria. And most studies are focused on these internal criteria. But the external criteria, these are largely neglected in research. And these are very important, particularly in workplace context, because we want to know, does it help in terms of your job performance? Do you perform better? And does it increase your productivity, error reduction, customer satisfaction, these kind of outcomes? So there's very few evidence that it works in terms of these external criteria. So the criteria question that was asked before the break is very, very important. Another thing is rigorous testing, mentioned by Jean as well, and I want to emphasize that also, that very few studies use the so-called randomized control design. And that's the default, that's the standard of scientific research. As long as we don't do these type of studies, we don't have rigorous evidence that mentoring might work. Now, what does it, I will explain briefly what it means, so-called randomized control design. There are two groups. Let's say there's a population of, or sample of people, 100 people or so, and you divide them in two groups, 50-50. 50 persons in the intervention group and 15 persons randomly assigned to the control group. Then there's a baseline measurement, and you expect no differences between both groups. Then there's the intervention, the mentoring program. It can take a couple of months, a year or so, 2 years maybe. And then you expect differences between both groups on the short term on time too. And when you find differences on both internal and external criteria, then you can conclude, okay, apparently it works. And it works particularly when also at the long term, there are still differences in the positive direction between both groups. There are all kinds of practical issues why we cannot apply these type of designs, but if there's an option, if there's a possibility to apply a design like this, then we should do it, and then we can build evidence for mentoring and the positive effects of mentoring. Another issue that's largely neglected, but it's claimed, are the benefits for the mentor. We all believe that it has positive effects for the mentor. And some speakers today already emphasized that. They feel more enriched, etc. And that's apparently true, but there is very few empirical evidence, particularly in workplace mentoring, that shows that also mentors are benefiting from mentoring relationships. And all these potential outcomes, positive outcomes, are listed here. And these are basically hypotheses that it works that way, but we don't know. And similarly for the organization, an organization starts a mentoring program because they assume, they expect, they anticipate positive outcomes for the organization as a whole. We don't know, there's no evidence, it's claimed, and it's obvious that it has positive outcomes listed here on this slide, but we don't know. We need to test it and examine it. And also, we should not close our eyes for potential negative outcomes of mentoring. And that's also assumed, and there's anecdotal evidence, unfortunately, for also negative outcomes in workplace mentoring, but not much real evidence. And there are several potential negative outcomes. Undue credit, overprotection, sexual tension, or even worse, high demands made on the side of the mentor, etc. Several negative outcomes that should be examined as well. And also very important, that's the main question of this talk as well, maybe of this whole day, the whole summit, why, when, and for whom does it work? And that's largely neglected. What we know is that mentoring leads to more satisfaction, more the internal criteria, but why and when and how, there is some evidence, but very few. So that should be addressed, that main important question. So, and that's exactly the reason why we need a center for evidence-based mentoring. In pilot studies is a methodology like this, that people, mentees, also mentors, have to specify their goal and also specify the expected level of attainment. So what are you pursuing? When are you happy with the result? And at different moments in time, then you assess, okay, how far are you from that level of attainment? And that's assessed by both mentor and mentee and maybe other individuals in the context, for example, colleagues or supervisors. Now, of course, you have to know more about each individual goal. So you can ask about the commitment, the difficulty of the goal, etc. You should control for that, all kind of more statistical issues. But that's the way to go to make comparisons between individuals who are pursuing, in mentoring context, different goals. And that's what should be applied in future studies as well, this type of methodology, I think. Another issue is the focus on the mentor. Much has been done on the effects for the mentee, that's obvious. But also the mentor is important. It's a diet, so mentors should be part of the research as well. And it's widely acknowledged, of course, the role of the mentor. And what we do, we have some particular hypothesis of the role of the mentor. It's research done by Friederike Doorwald. She's here as well. I don't know where you are. She's over there presenting a poster on this research. And what we assume, what we test, is that particularly older people, already mentioned by Jean as well, benefit from being a mentor. And they are most suitable for the mentor role. And why is that? Now, there are different ideas that we have. First of all, generativity motivation might be higher among older people, older employees. Generativity motivation is that you are motivated to help, to support the new generation forward. They have a stronger preference for emotionally meaningful experiences. And they have typically well-developed emotional competencies. Maybe somewhat better developed than younger people. And what's also interesting that there's evidence that it does not decrease emotional competencies when you get older. In contrast, it might even improve. In contrast to other competencies like cognitive competencies and physical competencies, they are typically decreasing when you get older. So there are different reasons why older employees are more suitable for the mentor role. And another reason is that older employees obviously have, more older employees have reached their plateau within their job relative to younger people. And a mentoring role can enrich and give new meaning to their job and to their career. And that's what we currently are examining. Another issue is when you set your goals as a mentee and as a mentor, should you focus on your strength or your weaknesses? And what we know, we did some studies or published studies that working with strengths or developing your strengths, further developing your strength, that works great. And why is that? Because strength gives you the perception of competence, obviously. It is your strength, so you feel competent. And that makes you more intrinsically motivated, and that makes you more willing to put effort in further developing your strength, because you love working on your strength, because you're good in it. And that's what we found over and over again, that individuals are more likely to put effort into their development when they focus on their strength. But mentoring, but also education in general, training in organizations, training in sports, etc., is typically focused on deficiencies. Okay, why are you here? No, I want to learn or develop my interpersonal skills, or get some knowledge, develop some knowledge, or whatever. And typically, you want to close the gap between where you are at a relatively lower level to a higher level. So deficiencies is in most cases a starting point, but people are less motivated in general to work on their deficiencies relative to their strength. So our idea is, and that's what we're going to test, and also some studies are running now, that you have to focus on both strengths and deficiencies at the same time. Because working on strength are particularly important to give, to have the confidence and the self-confidence, self-esteem, etc., which makes you also more open and sensitive to developing your deficiencies. And that's called self-affirmation. So when people self-affirm, so I'm good in this, that, then you are more open to your weaknesses. And based on that general finding, we can expect that focusing on both strength and weaknesses will lead to better results in mentoring. So that's our hypothesis. Another issue I want to mention, it's a final issue. There are many other variables you can focus on, but this is just a suggestion for interesting, what we think interesting and promising variables. That's people's mindset. And what's a mindset? To explain it, I want you to think about this statement. Your intelligence is something about you that you can't change very much. So I'd like to know who agrees with this statement. So you cannot really change your intelligence. Raise your hands, please, if you agree. 1, 2. Who disagrees? Yeah, sorry. Now, many people disagree. Now, this is an atypical audience, I would say. Normally, you get a bit 50-50. Nevertheless, people can differ on this, have a different opinion about this statement. And interestingly, now first of all, if you agree with this statement, you are a so-called entity theorist, or you have a fixed mindset that you don't believe that you can change. And if you disagree, you have a growth mindset or an incremental mindset that you believe in development. And you can apply this to all sorts of personal qualities. So you can be an entity theorist with regard to intelligence, but if there's another statement, for example, you are shy as a person and that's how you are, you cannot change it. Now, some people believe it, other people don't. Or leaders are born and not made. Or as a musician, you are born as a musician, or you can be trained as a musician. Now, people can change on these on different qualities, and it can be entity on one dimension and growth or increment on the other dimension. Now, interesting. There's a group in Stanford University under the supervision of Carol Dweck, famous colleague in this field, and you can find on their mindsetkit.org. You can find all kind of materials on this topic. And for example, is a growing mindset, is that just hope? Is there hope that we can change, or is there some evidence already? And I can briefly show you this video.
What determines our intelligence? One school of thought is that, okay, maybe you're either just born with it, or you either have it or you don't. Some people are smart, some people are less smart. Or maybe you can change it. And it turns out there's actually been a lot of research on this in the last few decades. And the answer is pretty clear, that your intelligence can actually be changed. What we've learned, what researchers have taught us, is that our brains are actually a lot like a muscle. We know that you can grow your muscles by going into the gym and doing exercise and straining your muscles. You don't just work on things that are easy for your muscles to do. You do things that your muscles have to struggle with, that your muscles have to strain with, and then they rebuild themselves and they come back stronger. By struggling, it's a signal to your body to devote more resources to that part of the body. And we see that exact same thing with the brain. And here are just a couple of examples of it. This first one, this shows how the human brain develops in early childhood. This is a depiction of the neurons in a brain at birth. And then as a child develops, it interacts with its environment. It tries things out. It struggles. It struggles to talk, to converse, to interact with folks, to understand the world around it. And as it struggles, you see that by age 6, you have a much deeper and much stronger connectedness between the different neurons. Similarly, I can never say that word. These are depictions of these are the neurons of two different scenarios. This is the nerves of animals that were in unstimulating environments where they're not around other animals. They're in a bear cage, And then this is the brain of an animal that is in a stimulating environment, that is constantly being challenged, that is constantly looking at stimulating new things. And so the big takeaway from this whole area of research is you absolutely can change your intelligence, that your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And that the best way to grow it isn't to do things that are easy for you. That might help a little bit. But what really helps your brain is when you struggle with things. And it's actually research shows that your brain grows the most not when you get a question right, but when you get a question wrong. So at least for me, this is incredibly exciting because it lets me know that when I'm going through something and I'm facing those times of maybe a little bit of adversity or a little bit of frustration, I can feel good about the fact that those are actually the times that I am growing the most. And this isn't just something that I'm saying, nice words. Research tells us when you get something wrong, when you challenge your brain, when you review why you got it wrong, when you really process that feedback, that's when your brain grows the most. And that if you keep doing that, you're well on your way to having a stronger, more able, and I guess you could say, smarter brain.
That is interesting. And why is this so important for mentoring? If a mentee, if you ask what's your goal in a mentee-mentor relationship, now, for example, developing my cognitive skills or math related things, and if as a mentee you are more entity and you say, okay, yeah, that's what I had as well at high school. You don't have to put effort in it. You never learn it. It's impossible. So just focus on other things in which you're good at, but neglect all the qualities or skills you are not good at. Now, then, of course, nothing will change because you are not going to work on it. But if you believe that you can change it, now then you will improve, probably to a particular level, but at least you will improve. So your own ideas about changing these type of qualities, and also mentees' ideas about changing qualities are very predictive in if there is some growth. If you look at the scientific literature, for example, to intelligence, there's of course a big part is innate. You got a particular level or from your parents. But there's also a lot of, but the part of it, it's just learned. So from a scientific point of view, there are arguments for both. So in practice, it's just your belief. You can focus on the genetic part, the nature part, or you can focus on the nurture part. Now, if you focus on the nurture part, then you can develop, and if you focus on the nature part, then you take it for granted. Okay, that's it, and I cannot change it. And therefore, it's very important. But also, when we're talking about workplace mentoring, it's also important for the policy of the organization. So when you believe more, where you emphasize more talent as innate, as gifted, versus talent as acquired, then it has consequences for your selection policy, for example, for retention policy. You have done in the gifted innate camp. People have a preference for exclusive talent management approaches, so select the most promising individuals. And when you are in the other camp of acquired talent, then there's a preference for inclusive talent management programs. So everybody's more or less welcome because everybody can grow and develop and improve. And these policies are based on assumptions that innate talent is necessary, but not sufficient. It's not 100% innate talent, or it's all somewhere in the middle. It's a matter of emphasis. And in the other category of acquired talent, training, development, and experience are the main reasons. But of course, innate factors play a role as well. So the focus of human resource management in different organizations can be either focused on identification and retention of talent, or to training and development of talent, and, for example, launching mentoring programs, supporting these type of programs, etc. So in summary, Again, this is a kind of proposal for a particular set of variables that might be interesting to examine in the context of mentoring. Focus on strength will lead to more confidence, intrinsic motivation, and effort. But the combination with weaknesses, that might be the best way to go. That would lead to all kinds of outcomes, external and internal, goal attainment, well-being, job performance. Moderators are, there's a lot of evidence already about the quality of the mentor and mentee relationship. That's what we know. That can strengthen the positive links to outcomes, and also a growth mindset that is very critical for this whole train of thought. So, in conclusion, workplace mentoring seems to be an effective talent development strategy or tool in organizations. To better understand why, when, and for whom it does work or does not work, we need more evidence, and that's exactly the reason why we need a Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring. Thank you.